What if I told you that the highest place in the world is closer to hell than to heaven? In La Rinconada, what separates wealth from poverty is the same fine line that divides life from death. At an altitude of 16,700 feet, at the top of the world, this city challenges even the most fearless. Air is scarce, gold is abundant, and hope almost non-existent. But what really haunts La Rinconada is not just the depths of the mines, but the dark practices its inhabitants resort to in order to survive. Are you ready to face a brutal reality where the most appalling cruelties, including human sacrifices, still exist? Today, Bello Mundo will take you to explore what makes this place so unique. Get ready to discover a city where survival is a game of chance, and the devil deals the cards. Number 1. Location and geographical data. La Rinconada is nestled in the icy heights of the Peruvian Andes, in the district of Ananea, in the heart of the Puno region. This remote piece of the world, almost on the border with Bolivia, is so isolated that it seems to be on another planet. The town is more than 870 miles from Lima, the capital of Peru, and a trip between the 2 points can take almost a whole day. You can already tell that getting there is no easy task, right? Located at an incredible 16,700 feet above sea level, La Rinconada challenges even the bravest. The climate is relentless. Temperatures rarely exceed 0 degrees Celsius, and the thin air turns daily life into a constant test of endurance. The road to this city is as complicated as the environment itself. Few risk the precarious roads that lead to this remote and inhospitable place. The surrounding geography is breathtaking, with snow-capped mountains that create a scene of extreme beauty. But on the other hand, La Rinconada faces serious environmental and infrastructure challenges, making life difficult to live, a brutal and unimaginable scenario. And why would anyone choose to live in such a hostile place? The answer is simple: gold. Number 2. History. The history of La Rinconada is not that old. It all began a few decades ago. Before the discovery of gold, it was a small village with just a few hundred people who basically lived off subsistence farming and grazing in the mountains. But in the late 1980s and early 1990s, everything changed. The gold rush swept through the region, bringing with it the promise of quick wealth. With the discovery of rich gold veins and the increase in the metal's value, thousands of people began to migrate to La Rinconada, all in search of a better, or at least more lucrative, life. The small village exploded in population, but without any planning. The result? A chaotic, disorganized town with minimal infrastructure. Between 2001 and 2009, the population is estimated to have grown by 235%, jumping from 30,000 to around 50,000 inhabitants today. And if you're wondering what it's like to live in La Rinconada, the answer, unfortunately, is not at all pleasant. Number 3. Hell on Earth. La Rinconada has grown rapidly, but neither has its infrastructure. In fact, living there is like facing a real nightmare. Just imagine, in addition to facing a lack of oxygen, with up to 50% less air available than normal, the residents live with a scenario that looks more like an open-air garbage dump, since there is no garbage collection system. Even with all the gold that could promise wealth, the reality is quite different. The road to the city looks decent for the first 130 kilometers, but the rest of the journey is a real challenge. Potholes, lack of safety, and total precariousness. Basic sanitation? No way. The city has no sewage system, water treatment, or garbage collection. People here burn or bury their waste on the outskirts of the city, which only exacerbates the already serious pollution in the region. Wastewater, and here I mean wastewater, feces and urine, flows through the streets unchecked, and the houses, which look more like metal shacks, have no electricity or heating. With temperatures that can reach -10 degrees Celsius for much of the year, daily life in La Rinconada becomes a real battle for survival. Hygiene is also far from ideal. Many families don't even have their own kitchens or bathrooms, forcing them to use public spaces for their basic needs. To make matters worse, water is transported from nearby glaciers via a web of makeshift hoses. If there is a positive side to this story, and to call it that is almost ironic, it is that the low temperatures prevent organic waste from rotting quickly, which avoids the unbearable smell that would be common in places with similar conditions. It's not for nothing that this place is nicknamed Hell on Earth, the Devil's Mine, and one of the most horrible places in the world. And to top it off, it lies at the foot of La Bella Durmiente mountain, which ironically got its name from its shape, a sad contrast to the harsh reality of its surroundings. Number 4. Life at 16,000 feet of altitude. If you think the challenges are already enormous, living at more than 16,000 feet of altitude in La Rinconada takes everything to an extreme level. Literally. The first major obstacle for the locals is the lack of oxygen. Being so high up, the air is much thinner, which means they only breathe half as much oxygen as they would at sea level. Those arriving from abroad need at least a month to adapt to this new reality. For this reason, La Rinconada is known as the world capital of chronic mountain syndrome. This condition, caused by a lack of air, brings with it a series of health problems: dizziness, headaches, ringing in the ears, a racing heart, and, in more serious cases, even heart failure. For those who suffer from this, the only solution is to descend to a lower altitude. But the problem is that, in some cases, the damage is permanent. You've heard of La Paz, the capital of Bolivia, right? Well, it's at an altitude of 11,800 feet, and there around 6 to 8% of the population suffers from this syndrome. Now imagine La Rinconada, where the altitude is even higher. 1 in 4 residents live with these symptoms every day. But how do people manage to survive up there with so little oxygen? Recently, scientists discovered that the human body has an incredible ability to adapt. In fact, it's amazing how our bodies can adapt to extreme situations. One example of this is the Sama Bajau, also known as the Gypsies of the Sea. Because of the environment they live in, they have developed the incredible ability to see underwater and hold their breath for long periods, defying the limits of human biology. Curious, isn't it? Well, we have a video on the channel that explores this fascinating story, the real-life Aquaman. You've got to check it out. But calm down, hold your curiosity, and finish this video first, okay? Back to our destination in the heights of Peru. In La Rinconada, longtime residents have developed an incredible ability. Their bodies are able to produce more blood cells or red blood cells to compensate for the lack of oxygen. These cells are responsible for transporting air throughout the body, allowing them to survive in such extreme conditions. Number 5. The working system, Cachorreo. If you think you've heard of hard labor, what happens in the mines of La Rinconada will shock you. The work system there is so informal that it's like a lottery. The mines have no regulation of labor rights, which means that the miners are at the mercy of their luck. In the past, workers would spend up to 30 days in the mines without being paid a penny. Only at the end of this period would they receive something based on the amount of gold they managed to extract. Today, the system has changed, but not necessarily for the better. Now, the so-called cacoreo reigns, a kind of cruel lottery. Mine owners don't pay fixed salaries. Instead, on 1 or 2 days of the month, workers are entitled to take home as much ore as they can carry, in sacks weighing up to 50 kilos. Sounds like a golden opportunity, right? But it's not. Most people work all month without knowing how much, or if, they will receive, living in extreme poverty. Number 6. Dangerous conditions in the mines. And if the lack of a steady paycheck wasn't enough of a problem, the working conditions in the mines are even bleaker. Workers' health is constantly under threat. Exhausting working hours, exposure to chemicals such as mercury, and lung diseases become part of everyday life. Not to mention the thin air, which we've already mentioned, which makes the situation even worse. The La Rinconada mines are extremely polluted, and the risk of accidents is frighteningly high. Explosions and roof collapses are 25% more common here than in mines in developed countries. No wonder the life expectancy of miners in the region is only 35 years. To make matters worse, many workers suffer from silicosis, an inflammation of the lungs caused by the constant inhalation of silica dust. According to Peru's National Union of Mine Workers, practically all miners in the region develop some degree of this disease over time. These brutal conditions have created a local culture in which miners believe that, in order to endure so much suffering, they need to be womanizers and drinkers. And so the scenario of despair only gets worse, which leads us to a new scenario of terror, that of the exploitation of women. Number 7. Exploitation and forced labor. In addition to all the problems we've already mentioned, La Rinconada has an even darker reality: trafficking in women and prostitution. Many women, including teenagers, work in the city's bars and brothels. What's even more shocking is that many of them are victims of human trafficking, forced into this cruel universe. As we said earlier, among miners there is a superstition that luck comes to those who drink a lot and have sex with young women. And this opens the door to a terrible problem: child exploitation. It is estimated that more than 1,500 teenagers between the ages of 15 and 17 offer intimate services in search of money to survive. It is estimated that more than 2,500 women are involved in this activity, against their will. In 2016, a large-scale police operation mobilized more than 900 officers in an attempt to combat sexual slavery and forced labor in the city. During the operation, more than 300 people were rescued and 5 suspected traffickers were arrested. And this wasn't the only effort. Years before, in 2012 and 2014, other police operations resulted in the rescue of more than 1,000 victims. However, year in, year out, and nobody does anything, today it is estimated that the situation is 3 times worse. Number 8. The Lawless City. If everything already seemed out of control, La Rinconada still bears the mark of being a true lawless land. Geographical isolation and the almost total absence of authorities have turned the city into an environment where crime runs wild. Robberies, murders, and disappearances are part of everyday life, and when the police do show up, they rarely manage to stem the tide of violence. But the danger isn't restricted to the streets. Deep in the mines, the workers face another constant threat: the cousins. These armed robbers break into the mines to steal gold and equipment, attacking the miners and leaving a trail of fear in their wake. In other words, survival is a daily challenge, both inside and outside the mines. Number 9. human sacrifices and relations with demonic entities. In addition to mining and crime, La Rinconada is surrounded by ancient beliefs and superstitions that still shape the lives of its inhabitants. One of these practices is the ritual known as pacho, or payment to the earth, where miners make offerings to demonic entities to ensure prosperity. Although the pacho is a traditional ritual where farmers thank Pachamama, Mother Earth, for good harvests, in the mining sector it takes on a much darker tone. Here, workers make offerings to a supernatural figure associated with the devil, called Tío de la Mina, an entity that supposedly rules the underground and decides on the fate of the miners. The aim is simple: to ensure that gold continues to be found. These offerings begin with small items such as cigarettes, fruit, and alcohol, but in the depths of local superstition, it is believed that the most valuable offering is human life. The logic is clear. The greater the offering, the greater the gratitude of this demonic entity, and consequently, the greater the profits. This fuels the rumors of human sacrifices in macabre rituals, something that, according to some reports, still goes on underground. Now you understand why we said at the beginning that the highest place in the world is closer to hell than to heaven. And that's it for our journey to La Rinconada. If you've been intrigued by the dark stories and extreme conditions of this fascinating place, don't stop here. Keep exploring other amazing destinations and their unbelievable curiosities in our Bello Mundo. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos, and if you haven't already, join our community of passionate explorers. To those of you who stayed until the end, thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next video.